We got what we wanted out of the deal. We were gone. We were lucky we didn't have to work 3 years or something. He stayed. I was glad I didn't have to stick around, but we didn't get a dime out of that in the end.
Why? What happened?
They blew it. I mean, it's a classic case of they basically threw out every single thing that we did that made us great. They killed the company-wide bonus program. They stopped being open book. They pitted everybody against each other. They just, frankly, stopped doing what made us a successful company. And it just completely cratered. We had to put, I think Fred and I put like 400,000 of the money into retention bonuses. And that all, and that was for 18 months for some of the key people. And as soon as their 18 months was up, man, they were gone. Boom. They took their money, got their check, and then see you later. They all left. Most of those businesses, most of those people went into business, competing businesses with the firm. And most of them are still out there today, in fact. So it basically fragmented and sent the pieces everywhere. Eventually, the magazine group was carved off again and sold to somebody else. The SBA did not like this company. This venture capital, or excuse me, private equity firm was an SBIC, Small Business Investment Corporation. And you know how those work. For like every dollar of private money they raised, they got $2 or $3 from the SBA. And so they were kind of keeping an eye on them. And these other two companies that they had acquired, they had too much debt on their balance sheet. They immediately put the debt from us and these other two acquisitions. I think they had like 15 or 16 million in debt right away on the balance sheet. And the SBA didn't like that. They thought it was too much in one entity. So they made them cut the magazine group out. They then borrowed some money from a mezzanine fund. And I was not really ever very familiar with how mezzanine funds worked, but basically for our listeners who don't know, they lend money to established growing companies at higher interest rates with no strings attached. So these guys borrowed $6 million, and it too was an SBIC. It was a fund. And they borrowed $6 million from the mezzanine fund to go buy other companies. They bought one small company for like $1 million. They didn't buy any others. I don't think they made a single payment. And so 3 years after they borrowed the money, they got foreclosed on by the mezz. So by that time, the company's down to about 3.1 million in revenue, has like a $6 million negative net worth, is losing over $1 million a year.
Wow. I've got so many questions about that. So before I get into some of the technical questions around that, I'd just be curious to know how you felt as Fred, I'm assuming, is keeping you in the loop as people are leaving, their 18 months are coming up and they're like, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
You're seeing what's happening through the grapevine. I'm assuming Fred is kind of keeping you somewhat in the loop as to what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, he was.
What was that like to see your baby struggle to breathe?
Well, it's never good. I mean, you've got your as anybody who builds a company like this has a certain amount of identification is tied up in the success of the business, and it's still got my name on it. So, you don't feel good about it. On the other hand, it was sad to see. On the other hand, I was able to move on quickly, which I was lucky. It's part of the reason why we took the deal that we did, and it wasn't richer than it was. I was lucky to get out of there and doing my own thing. I started another business pretty quickly after that and relocated and became a college professor. And, so I was living a pretty good life, honestly. But yeah, it was sad to see the company declining, and I'd get calls from clients and emails from people complaining and telling me about stupid stuff they were doing.
So as you look at the autopsy now, it sounds like you draw a significant line to the culture that you created that was destroyed. And the culture, if I'm understanding correctly, was very collaborative. You had an open book team. You shared you shared information, financial information. You shared profits. You let people buy in, so there was shared equity. This was a Jack Stack open book management sort of case study.
Yes.
And they flipped it and made it. It sounds like more of a spreadsheet, Wall Street kind of company where it's like, no, that doesn't make any sense. Why would we give all these sort of shared bonuses? Like we've got to, meritocracy. We've got to have individual bonuses based on individual contributions. And,
yes.
And they went from your culture to a very different culture. Is that the reason it failed?
Yeah, that's part of it. I mean, they also did other things like just went crazy on overhead, and the headquarters was in the IBM building on Wacker Drive in Chicago. And, you had to go up to like the 60th floor or whatever, and then walk across a lobby and then go up again. It's just too much of that stuff. The guy they put in as CEO, eventually he was having some kind of an affair with a marketing person, and he and the CFO embezzled from the company. They never got charged with any crime. They were confronted, and they wired some of the money back. And then there was a claim filed on the D&O insurance that paid another, I think it was about $400,000 that they got back that way through the D&O insurance. But yeah, they weren't.
It sounds like a soap opera.
Yeah, they weren't running it like we did. Okay, I'll just say that. It just was a totally different game. And the last thing that happened before they got taken back by their lender, I had the guy who was the chairman and the head of the private equity firm come visit me here in Fayetteville and said, when you owned this company, your intercompany travel charges were never more than $20,000 in a year, and now it's $400,000. How do you explain that? And I said to the guy, you're a CPA. How do you explain it? Okay, I have no idea how you did that. Well, it turned out that was part of their scheme is they each had credit cards, the CEO and CFO, and they would just buy whatever they wanted, and then the company paid it, and they charged it off to intercompany travel. And this company had, outside accountants that evidently didn't catch this stuff, which is mind-boggling to me. As I said, we had a history of audited financials because we knew we wanted to build this to sell it. And it always makes a buyer more comfortable when they know you've got good financials out there, not compilations, not reviews. We paid for an audit, And anyway, so yeah.
But it's like the vultures, picking up the carcass. It's unbelievable. I just want to be clear on something. So the private equity group pays, they say 10 million, 80% in cash. You roll a bit of equity. Right. Thank goodness you made that a relatively small portion of the deal. They take on this mezzanine debt. And you said earlier that mezzanine debt, mezz financiers will give financing to established companies that are growing with no strings attached. But there was a string attached, if I'm understanding this correctly, that in the event the company defaulted, wasn't able to pay back the loan, they had the rights to take over the business, which they did.
Yes, that is absolutely correct. So the collateral is the business itself. Yeah.
Got it. That's helpful. Okay. Got it.
Yep.
Okay. So no personal guarantee, et cetera, but if all hell goes, everything goes wrong, then they can take the business back, which they did. They brought in the crooked guy who was a disaster. And so where does it go from there?
Excuse me. Well, after a year of this guy, they then called me up and said, hey, would you be willing to come back? And the first thing I said was, no, I'm a teacher here, 3/4 time professor. And I've got this other business that's rocking along, and it's doing $5 or $10 million a year in revenue by that time. And the last thing I want is another job. Well, they kept leaning on me. Then, I talked to my best friend, who was my basically the manager of my other business, and she's like, oh, maybe you should do it. I said, okay, I'll work 25% time. And they said they'd pay me at the time, I think it was 166,000 for 25%. And they gave me, I hate to misspeak on this stuff. Sometimes I forget exactly what the numbers were, but I think it was around like 12% of the company. Maybe it was more than that. They just gave it to me. Okay. So, but my first task was to find a CEO who could run it. I said, oh, and I also said, the only way I'm going to do this is if I can open up an office in Fayetteville and hire some of my friends. All right. And I said, the woman who worked for my other business, actually, she didn't work for my other business at that time, but she was my friend and I respected her. So she goes, you should do it. So I did. So she's the first person I hired. And she and I are married today, but that's another story. But so she was the first person I hired. I set up an office here and we started to bring some of the functions here. And of course, then we encountered all the problems of discovering how this guy was sucking all the money out of the company. So on top of the fact that we had almost no staff, I think we were down to 18 people, 19 people. Reputations shattered, product quality is horrible, tons of complaints, accounts payable out the yin yang. We owed everybody hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to hotels. 400,000 to this hotel, 200,000 to that one. They skipped out an office in the middle of the night. We had a judgment against us. It just was
soap opera.
It was just unbelievable. So, a lot of this. So my business manager and myself, we just had to slog through it. We just turned this thing around. I mean, and Sonia negotiated with every single person we owed money to, got on payment plans. Even the judgment for 366, she got down. What if I pay you 150,000 over the next 24 months? And if I'm late by 1 hour, you get the whole, you can go back after me for all of it. And they went for deals like that. Okay. I mean, you could say, well, that's terrible. That you're beating these people down. But I mean, we didn't create the problem. All right. And the choice was they get nothing. I mean, we had a serious negative net worth. So we did, and some of the people we did pay off in full, but we got out of everything one way or another. And then the next thing was, how are we going to grow this thing? Well, of course, direct mail had sort of died down over that time. And now we're into the e-marketing world. And so, my first thought was, we need to be emailing like crazy. I want to send out 3 emails a day to everybody on our list. And, the turnaround guy's like, oh, you'll kill the list. The lender's like, that's terrible. You'll kill the list. I'm like, I'm out of business like next week, if we don't sell stuff. So we just inundated the market with emails. And John, we increased our revenue by 60% over the next 2 years, which was a huge thing.
What happened to your subscribe rate? Did you lose a lot of subscribers?
We lost some, but the way I look at it, it's like, if for everybody who complains, if 50 people buy something, I'm like, I don't listen to the complainer. I've heard this so many times. I've been in so many arguments with people. I work with a company today that we went from a weekly email to sell our products and accessories to a daily email. And you know what happened? We started selling a lot more stuff. Okay. They believe it now. All right. But anyway, so, we did that. We made a lot of key hires. I hired back some people who used to work there, and then in 2012, I mean, by then we kind of got the ship straightened out, and we had to, the mezzanine fund that owned us was trying to close out. We knew we were up against a hard stop. So we needed to buy the company back from them in its entirety. Now I put another 250,000 into it along the way, by the way, which gave me 42.5%, I think, of the ownership. Okay. So then I sent one email out to the CEO of a large software company that serves our industry. I had met the guy once briefly, and I said, "Look, I'm Mark Zweig. Maybe you remember me. I've got this company that does all these things, and we serve the same industry you do. And I need some money to buy it back from the lender.